Welcome to the Revenge Story Times channel. Does size really matter? That was the question I found myself asking again and again, long after I should have stopped. At first, I was certain the answer was no. For years, I was perfectly content with the man I married, average in every way. My husband was everything I thought I needed. The passion was good, the intimacy was comfortable, and I never once questioned that what we shared was enough. But the thing about questions like these is that once they're planted, they grow. Soon, what used to feel sufficient wasn't so simple anymore. It wasn't the act itself that changed, it was the whispers I began hearing from everywhere, from friends, from strangers, from the dark corners of the internet, and eventually even from my own mind. Whispers about what could be. What might be better. Bigger. I never thought I'd be the kind of woman who'd entertain such ideas, but here I am, telling you this story. A story about how one question, one single thought, drove me to cross a line I never expected, and how the answer to that question changed everything. If you've ever wondered, deep down, what would happen if you really found out whether size matters, this is my confession. For the longest time, I thought I had it all. Life with James, my husband, was comfortable. Not extraordinary, but who really needs extraordinary? He was a good man, reliable, dependable. He loved me in the way that was expected, and I loved him in return. We had a steady routine, a comfortable home, and a passion that, though never on fire, burned steadily. I had no reason to doubt him, to doubt us. Our intimacy was fine, not thrilling, not electrifying, but enough. That's what I told myself. And honestly, it wasn't even something I thought about much. Sex was just one part of the puzzle that was our relationship, and the rest of our life was so solid, so secure, that I never questioned if it could be better. Then everything changed the night I was out with some girlfriends. We were at a small bar, talking about the usual stuff, work, life, the latest gossip, when the conversation took an unexpected turn. "You know, I've never been with a man who was really well endowed," Sarah said, sipping her drink. "I hear it's different, like it just feels better. Are you really buying into that whole size matters thing?" Rebecca, always the skeptic, scoffed. "It's all about connection, right? I mean, the guy could be huge, but if the chemistry's off, it's nothing." The conversation was light-hearted, but the seed was planted. They laughed and joked about how some of their partners had been on the smaller side, but it was all in good fun. Still, I couldn't shake the thought from my mind. For years, I'd convinced myself that size didn't matter. James was average. He was mine. I never really felt like I needed more, or so I thought. But the more I replayed those words in my head, the words about better, about more, about what might be different if there was something bigger, something better out there, the more I felt that nagging itch. And like any curiosity that starts small, it quickly grew, becoming louder, more insistent, more difficult to ignore. The next few days felt strange. I tried not to dwell on the conversation with my friends, but it kept coming back, like an echo in my mind. I found myself looking at James differently, scrutinizing him in ways I never had before. Was he really enough? Was what we had really all there was to experience? Was this the full extent of intimacy? I told myself I was being ridiculous. Maybe I had heard something I shouldn't have, or maybe it was just the wine talking. But the more I tried to push the thought away, the more it lingered. That question, does size really matter, had taken root in my mind, and I couldn't let it go. One night, after a quiet dinner at home, James was in the kitchen cleaning up, and I sat on the couch, absently scrolling through my phone. I don't know why I did it, but I opened a dating site. I wasn't looking for anything serious, God, no. I didn't want to cheat. I didn't want to betray James. I was just curious. There it was, staring me in the face, a list of qualities people were looking for. Height, weight, personality, interests, and then, right there in the middle, something that caught my eye: what's your preference in physicality? For the first time, I looked at the profiles not for their faces or their interests, but for what they said about size. Some of the men in their descriptions proudly boasted about their endowments. One even had a picture that was suggestive. I clicked on their profiles, intrigued by what they wrote. I wasn't interested in chatting with anyone yet. I just needed to know what they were offering, what the world out there looked like, what I might be missing. I told myself it was innocent enough, just exploring. But the truth was, something was stirring inside me, a curiosity. A yearning. And that's when I saw him. His profile picture was confident. He looked strong, sure of himself. But it was his description that hooked me. He was direct, honest, he didn't beat around the bush. And there, at the end of his profile, was a line that stopped me dead in my tracks. I believe in the power of giving a woman everything she deserves, physically and emotionally. That one line haunted me. I'd never been with a man who talked like that, not with that kind of assurance, not with that kind of confidence. I couldn't help but wonder, did he mean what I thought he meant? I messaged him. I told myself it was harmless, just talking, just exploring. But I couldn't ignore the little voice inside my head that wondered what it might feel like to be with a man who wasn't average. What it might feel like to be with someone who delivered on that promise. To experience what my friends had whispered about. To know if it truly was better. Now that the question has been raised, and the curiosity is starting to take hold, you can't help but wonder. What happens next? Can you trust me? This story takes a turn you won't expect. Make sure to hit that like button and subscribe because you don't want to miss what happens when curiosity gets the best of a good woman. Stay tuned. The next few days were a whirlwind of confusion. The flirtatious messages I'd exchanged with him lingered in my mind long after I'd closed my phone and forced myself back into the reality of my life. James was busy with work, and I busied myself with the mundane tasks of our home, laundry, cooking, cleaning. On the surface, everything seemed normal, but beneath it all, my thoughts were consumed by something I hadn't expected. I couldn't stop thinking about him. It wasn't just his confidence or the way he seemed so assured of his ability to give a woman everything she deserves. It was his unapologetic approach to his physicality, how he wore it like a badge of honor, almost daring me to question if I was truly content with what I had at home. The seed had been planted, and now I was watching it grow silently in the background of my everyday life. But that was the thing about seeds, once you start to nurture them, they don't stay small for long. Soon, I realized I was no longer looking at James the same way. I'd always thought I loved him completely, that we were perfectly suited for one another. But now I couldn't stop comparing. It was subtle at first, a glance at James in the shower, my eyes tracing the lines of his body, his average frame. The physical connection we shared was fine, sure, but something had shifted. I began to wonder if there was more out there for me. Was I truly content? Did I even know what true satisfaction felt like, or had I simply accepted what I had because it was all I'd ever known? One night, after we'd put the kids to bed and I was lounging on the couch, I felt that familiar itch again. My phone lay beside me on the couch, and without thinking, I picked it up. I clicked on the dating app and opened the messages I'd exchanged with him, Brad, the man from earlier. He had responded, his tone still direct, still intriguing. "So what are you really looking for then?" he had written, with a playful wink emoji. I paused before typing. Was this what I wanted? To take it further? I had to admit, part of me was curious, so curious, in fact, that I felt my heart race in anticipation. But another part of me was terrified. Terrified of crossing a line that could never be undone. I told myself I'd just have a little conversation, that was all. Just some harmless chatting, just a few words to see what it was like. I could still walk away at any time. I wasn't doing anything wrong, right? So I typed back, I guess I'm just curious. Wondering if there's more to experience, you know? It was honest enough, but the truth was, I was looking for something specific. I wanted to know if that thing I couldn't name, size, could really make a difference. Within minutes, he replied. Curiosity is a good thing, but you should know, when you get a taste of something better, it's hard to go back to average. The words hit me like a slap, but at the same time, they excited me. There was something electric about the way he said it, so bold, so confident, so sure of himself. I stared at my phone for a long time after that, my fingers hovering above the screen. Should I take it further? Was it just a phase, this feeling of dissatisfaction? Or was I really ready to take that step? Was I even prepared for what came next? I closed the app and set my phone down, but I couldn't shake the feeling of what was left unsaid. There was something about his words that stuck with me. It wasn't just about physicality, it was about power, confidence, and the kind of satisfaction I'd never dared to explore. The next day, I tried to go back to normal. I made breakfast for James, kissed him on the cheek as he left for work, and tried to focus on the daily routine of life. But in the back of my mind, there was a voice that wouldn't let go, a whisper that urged me to take action. The idea of signing up for more was tempting. The thought of meeting someone who could give me that more, that heightened satisfaction, was hard to resist. I told myself I wasn't looking for love or even an affair, just a test. A chance to see if there was something more out there. Just to prove whether size mattered or not. That afternoon, I sat on the couch again, phone in hand. I opened the dating app and scrolled through the profiles. I saw men who were fit, muscular, confident. And then I saw one profile that caught my attention. His name was Alex. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a strong jawline and piercing eyes. But it wasn't his face that drew me in, it was his description. He didn't just talk about physical attraction. He talked about pleasure, about satisfying a woman in every way possible, about understanding a woman's desires and fulfilling them completely. I didn't need to read the rest of his profile to know what he was implying. I could feel it deep in my gut, a pull, a desire. I messaged him. It was a simple hi, but my fingers trembled as I hit send. I told myself I was just exploring. It wasn't an affair, it was just a conversation. But as I hit send, I couldn't help but wonder what would happen if I took this further, if I really explored this curiosity. What if he could give me what I was missing? The first time I saw Alex, I knew things were about to change. When I walked into that hotel bar and laid eyes on him, everything around me seemed to disappear. There was something magnetic about his presence, like he commanded the room without saying a word. His broad shoulders, the way his dark eyes seemed to take in every inch of me, there was no mistaking it. He was everything I didn't even know I was missing. I tried to push those thoughts aside as I approached, but it wasn't easy. He stood as I got closer, his confident smile making my heart race faster than I could control. I could feel my pulse quicken as he shook my hand. But it wasn't just a handshake, his fingers lingered a little longer than necessary, his touch warm, sending a rush of electricity through my veins. I wasn't used to this feeling. This feeling of being wanted so openly, so unapologetically. "Hello, beautiful," Alex said, his voice deep and low, with just a hint of something wicked beneath the surface. "I'm glad you came. I've been thinking about this all day. I couldn't think straight." I wanted to say something witty, something clever, but all I could manage was a shaky smile and a soft hi. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks. We sat down and talked, about work, about life, but as the minutes passed, the conversation felt less and less important. What mattered was the energy between us. There was this thick, almost tangible tension in the air. Then, with a slow, deliberate movement, he reached across the table, his fingers gently grazing my wrist. I shivered under his touch, and he noticed. "I think you're ready," he murmured. And before I could process the words, his hand was on my shoulder, guiding me to stand. We didn't speak as we made our way to the elevator. It was like the air around us had become charged, the space between us growing smaller with every step. When the elevator doors closed behind us, I could feel my heartbeat in my chest, pounding loudly, echoing in my ears. I couldn't back out now. His room was sleek, minimalist, nothing fancy, just a large bed, soft lighting, and a window overlooking the city. He closed the door behind us and turned to face me, his eyes locked on mine, dark and intense. "I've been thinking about this all day," he said, his voice low, almost a growl. "I've been imagining how you'll feel, how you'll react. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. My body was screaming for what was coming next, and there was no turning back now. He walked toward me slowly, like a man who was in no rush, and in one fluid movement, he was right in front of me, his hands at my waist. Before I could think, he pulled me into him, his lips crashing against mine in a kiss that felt like fire. His kiss wasn't gentle. It wasn't soft. It was demanding, insistent, like he needed me in a way that no one ever had before. I was breathless, my hands running up his chest, feeling the hard muscles beneath his shirt, the heat radiating off him. He pulled back for just a second, his lips a hair's breadth from mine, and I could see the hunger in his eyes. "You have no idea how long I've wanted this," he whispered. Before I could respond, his hand slid down my back, pressing me closer to him, and I could feel the undeniable proof of his desire. He was huge. I'd heard stories, but this was different. I wasn't prepared for the raw, undeniable truth of it. "Does this feel okay?" he asked, his voice gruff, his lips moving down to my neck, his breath hot against my skin. I nodded, feeling the weight of his words, but I was already lost. I couldn't stop myself from responding to him. His hands moved lower, exploring, teasing, until I was trembling under his touch. He didn't rush, every motion was deliberate, each touch meant to draw out my response, to make me crave him even more. Finally, he moved me toward the bed, his hands guiding me gently but firmly, like he knew exactly what I needed. When I lay back, he hovered above me for a moment, his eyes scanning my body, taking in every inch of me. I felt exposed, vulnerable, but I didn't feel ashamed. "Not with him. Let me show you how good it can be," he murmured. With that, he lowered his body to mine, his hands exploring every inch of my skin. I didn't have time to think as he moved, taking his time, letting me feel every inch of him, every part of him. I gasped as he slid inside me, the sensation overwhelming, unlike anything I had ever felt before. It was more than physical, it was emotional. I felt every thrust, every movement, deep inside, like he was touching something inside me that had been dormant for years. His pace was slow at first, as though he was savoring every second. He pulled me into him, my legs wrapped around his waist as he shifted, deepening the connection. I could feel his size now, the fullness of him filling me, stretching me in ways I never thought possible. It wasn't painful, though. It was pleasure, pure and intense, flooding my senses. I moaned softly, unable to contain myself, and he smiled against my lips, clearly enjoying my response. "You like that?" he whispered, his voice thick with desire. I couldn't answer. There were no words. Only the sensations, the way he moved inside me, the way my body responded without hesitation. Every thrust, every pull, every shift of his hips sent shockwaves through me. It was overwhelming, but in the best way. When he finally pulled back, looking at me with that intense gaze, I couldn't breathe. The world seemed to stop, suspended in time. And then he moved again, faster, deeper, his hands gripping my hips as he took me over and over until I was dizzy with pleasure. I lost myself in him, in the moment, in the sensation. When it was over, we lay there tangled in the sheets, both of us catching our breath. I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and confusion. I had just done something I never thought I would. I had crossed a line. But was it worth it? Alex's hand brushed my hair away from my face as he looked at me, his eyes filled with something between admiration and desire. "You're incredible," he said softly. "I knew you'd be everything I wanted." But even as I lay there in the afterglow of something so new, so different, I couldn't shake the thoughts that started to cloud my mind. What about James? I had to go. It was just a mistake, a one-time thing. I told myself that as I dressed quickly, my heart heavy with guilt. But the memory of Alex's touch, the intensity of what we'd shared, lingered in my mind long after I left. The temptation had been felt, the boundaries crossed, and the consequences were starting to weigh on me. Would I be able to walk away from the man who gave me everything I never knew I wanted? The answers are coming, and you won't want to miss what happens next. Hit like, subscribe, and follow this wild journey as it takes another unexpected turn. I couldn't believe what I had done. It wasn't just the act itself, no. It was the lingering sensation of it, the feeling of Alex still on me, in me, and the way my body seemed to crave him long after I'd left his hotel room. I had betrayed James. I'd crossed a line I swore I would never cross. But as I drove home that night, guilt wasn't the only thing I felt. There was something else, something darker. Desire. I could still feel Alex's hands on my body, still remember the heat of his lips on my skin, his deep, confident thrusts that had made me lose myself completely. It was like a drug I couldn't shake, something addictive that haunted my thoughts. No matter how much I tried to push it away, it kept coming back, like a shadow I couldn't outrun. When I walked through the door, the smell of home hit me, freshly cooked dinner, the faint scent of my children's perfume lingering in the air. James was sitting at the kitchen table, his glasses perched on his nose as he skimmed through a pile of papers. He looked up when I entered, offering a smile. "Hey, babe. How was your day?" His voice was warm, familiar, and for a brief moment, it made me feel like everything was okay, that I hadn't just been with another man, giving myself to someone who wasn't him. But I wasn't okay. I wasn't even sure who I was anymore. "Fine," I said, forcing a smile, though my voice felt foreign. I walked past him, pretending to busy myself with the mundane tasks of the evening. But all I could think about was Alex, his touch, his size, the way he made me feel like I was more than just a wife, more than just a mother. Later that night, as we climbed into bed, I tried to act normal, tried to pretend like nothing had changed. James kissed me goodnight, a soft peck on my lips. I kissed him back, but it felt distant. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, wondering what I had become. Had I really needed that experience with Alex? Was it something I could never come back from? And what did that say about me, about how I felt about James? I knew deep down that I couldn't undo what had been done. And the more I tried to convince myself that I was satisfied, the more the memory of Alex clawed its way back to the surface. The next few days felt like a blur. I went through the motions, taking care of the house, spending time with the kids, but my mind was always elsewhere. One night, after a particularly quiet dinner with James, I saw a message pop up on my screen. It was from Alex. "I can't stop thinking about you. When can I see you again?" The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I hadn't expected him to reach out, and yet here it was. The temptation I had been trying to avoid was staring me in the face. I glanced at James, who was busy watching TV, completely unaware of the storm brewing inside me. I quickly typed a response, trying to keep my voice steady. "I don't know. I can't keep doing this." There was a pause before Alex replied, "Don't think about it too much. We both know what you want. What we both want." I felt a rush of heat flood my body. His words were like an invitation I couldn't refuse. I told myself I wouldn't go, that I'd stay loyal to James, but deep down I knew that once you've tasted something forbidden, it's hard to stop. The days that followed Alex's message were a blur, a constant battle between guilt and longing. The temptation to meet him again was undeniable. It gnawed at me, even when I was sitting across from James at the dinner table, laughing at some silly joke he made, pretending everything was fine. In my mind, though, I wasn't really there. I was still back in that hotel room with Alex, feeling the heat of his body, the size of him, the way he had made me feel. I couldn't escape it. I tried to block out the temptation, tried to convince myself that I wasn't that kind of woman, that I was better than this. But the more I fought it, the more the desire grew. Alex had awakened something in me, something primal and urgent, something I hadn't even realized was there. And no matter how hard I tried to ignore it, it kept calling me back. One afternoon, after a particularly long day, I found myself opening the dating app again. It was stupid, I knew that, but I couldn't help it. Every time I thought about Alex, I felt this intense craving, this need to see him again, to feel the way he had made me feel, desired, alive, like I was something more than just a wife and a mother. I opened his profile, my hands trembling as I scrolled through the messages we'd exchanged. The words seemed innocent enough, but I knew better. He wasn't interested in small talk, he wanted me, and I wanted him too. His message was still there, sitting at the top of the screen, waiting for me to respond. I can't stop thinking about you. When can I see you again? I hesitated for a moment, staring at the screen. It would be so easy to type back, so easy to tell him I wanted to see him. But I had made a promise to myself, to James, that it would never happen again. Yet here I was, on the edge of crossing that line once more. I took a deep breath and typed my reply. I don't know. I don't think I can do this again. Before I could stop myself, I pressed send. But then, less than a minute later, my phone buzzed with his reply. You're lying to yourself. You know you want this as much as I do. Don't make excuses. The words were like a punch to my gut. He knew. He knew I couldn't resist him, and the worst part was, he was right. I did want it. I wanted him. I stared at the message for what felt like an eternity. A part of me wanted to keep fighting, wanted to push away the temptation. But another part of me was already getting dressed in my head, already thinking of ways to make it happen. And so, I made my decision. I told James the first was going out for a quick errand. It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth either. He didn't question me. He never did. I was his wife, and he trusted me. I couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt as I left, the thought of him sitting at home, unaware of what I was about to do. But that guilt was quickly replaced by something else, anticipation. When I arrived at the hotel, my hands were shaking. I stood in front of the door for a moment, taking a deep breath before I knocked. My heart was racing, every inch of me trembling with a mix of excitement and nervousness. Alex opened the door with a smile, the same smile that had haunted my thoughts ever since that night. He didn't waste any time. The moment I stepped inside, he kissed me, his hands roaming over my body like he couldn't get enough of me. You came back, he murmured against my lips, his voice thick with desire. I couldn't stop thinking about you, I admitted, my words barely a whisper. His hands moved down my back, pulling me closer to him. I knew you'd come back. You couldn't stay away. It wasn't just the physical attraction that pulled me to him. It was the way he made me feel, the way he made me want him. It was like he was a magnet, drawing me in with a force I couldn't fight. I didn't want to fight it anymore. We didn't speak much after that. Our bodies took over the conversation. The way Alex kissed me, touched me, it was urgent, like he couldn't wait another second. His hands were everywhere, caressing, exploring, touching places I hadn't realized had been starved for attention. He was different from James, so much more aggressive, so sure of what he wanted. He didn't ask, didn't wait for permission, he just took. And I let him. As he guided me toward the bed, I could feel the heat of his body pressing against mine. My breath hitched as I felt his size against me, and I realized that the rumors had not done it justice. Alex was huge. The way he filled me was overwhelming, but it wasn't painful. No, it was perfect. Every inch of him seemed to find a place inside of me, stretching me in a way I hadn't thought was possible. I moaned, the sound slipping from my lips before I could stop it. That's it, Alex said, his voice rough as he moved inside me. Let go. Let me show you what you've been missing. And I did. I let go. I let him take me, let him fill me in a way that felt like a need I hadn't even known I had. It wasn't just physical, it was emotional, spiritual, almost. I had been starved for this kind of connection, for someone who could take control in a way James never had. His hands gripped my hips, pulling me toward him as he thrust harder, deeper. The pleasure built inside of me, a wave of sensation that was all-consuming. I couldn't think, couldn't speak, couldn't focus on anything other than the incredible feeling of being completely and utterly claimed by him. I didn't know how long it lasted. Time seemed to stop the moment Alex took me. I lost track of everything, of who I was supposed to be. All I knew was that, in this moment with him, I was finally alive. When we both finally collapsed into the bed, breathless and spent, I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and guilt wash over me. I had done it again. I had given into the temptation, crossed the line, and betrayed James once more. But the truth was, I didn't care, not then, not in that moment. Alex rolled over, his arm pulling me close as he kissed the top of my head. "I knew you'd come back to me," he said softly. I didn't respond. I couldn't. I was too lost in the feeling of what we had shared. I'm sitting here now, in the quiet of my living room, a house dim and still. James is asleep upstairs, unaware of the storm inside me. I wish I could say I'm at peace, but I'm not. I feel this unbearable mix of guilt and longing that won't let me go. I've asked myself 100 times if size truly matters. And the truth? I don't know if it does. Maybe it's more about the connection, the chemistry, the hunger that fills you when you're with someone who knows how to make you feel alive. But what I had with Alex, that mattered. The way he touched me, the way he made me feel, those moments weren't just about his size. They were about something deeper, something I'm afraid I'll never feel again. Now I'm left wondering, what have I done? And, more importantly, what happens next? Do I go back to pretending everything's fine, or do I risk it all to chase a feeling I know I can't explain? I don't have the answers. All I know is that nothing feels the same anymore. Thank you for listening to my story. Maybe you've judged me, maybe you've understood me. Either way, I hope you've stayed with me to the end. And if you want to hear what happens next, if there even is a next, I'll be here. See you in the next episode of Revenge Story Times. Take care of yourself and your loved ones. Goodbye.